Now for 12 News Legal Deep Dive, where we take a look at some of the biggest legal cases making headlines across the country. Our first case, the mass shooting at Florida State University yesterday. 2 people were killed, 6 others wounded. Police identified the suspect as 20-year-old Phoenix Eichner, the stepson of a sheriff's deputy in Tallahassee. His stepmom serving with that force for more than 18 years. Eichner spent time training with law enforcement before this attack and even served on the Sheriff's Advisory Council. Officials say the suspect used one of her handguns to carry out the shooting. Attorney Hector Diaz of Diaz Law joins me again. All right, so Hector, could his stepmother actually be charged with anything in this?
You know, at first glance, when I heard the story, I said, oh, yes, there might be. She's a sheriff's deputy. This young man has some kind of mental health issues.
Right.
We've seen a lot of these, right? But we've seen them typically with minors. The distinction here is that, this is an adult. And so I think that you're going to have law enforcement look at whether or not there was any kind of malfeasance or any kind of negligence or recklessness by the stepmother in terms of what did you know in terms of his mental health, where were the handguns placed? So it's too soon to say. I doubt it. I really do doubt it. This is
because again, he's an adult,
right?
At 20 years old.
That's one factor. I think that's one factor. But we're also talking about a sheriff's deputy. You would expect that they're going to secure their weapons and not leave them out or hand them over to somebody who's not, a law enforcement person. So we'll see.
Higher expectation.
Yeah,
for
too
that.
soon to say though.
All right. Our next case, the Menendez brothers and their fight for freedom after spending 35 years behind bars for killing their parents. Their long-awaited resentencing hearing was postponed yesterday, just hours after attorneys arrived at the courthouse as well as the families. The prosecution and the defense feuding over whether the judge should factor in a risk assessment that was initiated by California Governor Gavin Newsom to determine the brothers' potential risk to the public safety if he were to grant them clemency.
I wanted to make sure that the judge got a copy of that report. It represents additional facts, and the prosecution doesn't fear facts.
But the brothers' attorney, Mark Garagos, saying the DA has tainted the proceedings.
What's ultimately decided is we are filing a motion to recuse the district attorney in this case.
The judge says he will want to review that risk assessment before deciding on the resentencing. All right, so Hector, little confusing here, especially with this risk assessment now thrown into the mix. Explain what happened.
So they were set, I think by all accounts, the defense expected there to be a resentencing, they were going to go forward. And they feel that the DA is playing politics instead of, seeking justice here.
Okay.
And so he brought out this notion of, hey, there is a risk assessment. There's a report and evaluation that was done with both Menendez brothers, and the court should review it. The court should review it. Now, well, they've had it for quite some time, is I think what Mark Garagos is saying. And all of a sudden now it became an issue. And, and I'll tell you, I'm a defense attorney, but this is a situation where I'm trying to put my objective hat.
Okay.
And I'm siding here with Mark and his defense team because it's a situation where you really have to question if this DA is playing political chess. And if he is, he's in deep water here because, the idea of filing the motion to recuse. And, I read some of the comments that Mark Garagos is out here now saying, that this is a dog and pony show for nothing more.
That it's a charade.
Nothing more than his political base there. He was elected and he's trying to show his constituents, I'm tough on crime. He's still a DA as a minister of justice. He has a job to do. And what Mark is laying out is, let's just get to the resentencing. There's no basis to slow this down. We should have gone when we were set earlier this week, and it didn't go, and that's on you.
Okay.
And so, this is going to be interesting.
Well, what else was thrown into the mix that I didn't realize? So the defense, Garagos, he's claiming that because the DA grew up less than a mile from the Menendez home in Beverly Hills, that he has a personal interest in this case, which is why he must be recused. Is that enough to call for this recusal? I know Mark Garagos is saying, we're going to file this motion. I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't filed. There's a bit of legal chess that's going on here. The DA is pushing, saying, well, there might be an issue here. This risk assessment, it might show us some information that may cause the judge to say, you know what, they shouldn't go free. Right.
And I think what Mark Garagos is doing is he's pushing back. He wants to push back And the pushback is to say, you know what, we're going to look at you. We're going to look to see if you have a conflict of interest, if you have any bias, if you're not acting as a minister of justice. And it's, again, it's, legal chess that they're doing to push him back.
All right. Well, we know that the judge has now set May 9th as the date to discuss both those two motions. All right. Moving forward to our final case, Luigi Mangione. Yesterday, a federal grand jury indicted Mangione on 4 charges in the killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. This federal indictment carries the possibility of the death penalty. So, Hector, this is a little confusing too. So, federal prosecutors, they first announced those charges back in December after he was arrested, but yet he was just formally indicted yesterday. Why did it take so long?
Procedurally, what you see in situations where they have a federal criminal defendant that the federal government's concerned might flee, you'll see what's called a federal complaint to hold that person.
Okay.
And that's what happened. They held him. They also knew that the state of New York was filing criminal charges and he was going to be held without bail. He wasn't going anywhere. So I think that they slowed down their effort to then present their evidence to a federal grand jury in the Southern District of New York, and they took their time. And we saw now that they have a federal indictment.
Okay, so next week is his arraignment for those federal charges. Again, he's also facing those state charges that you're talking about, both in New York, also in Pennsylvania, where he was arrested at that McDonald's. So what will happen?
So he's going to go before a federal district court judge. A lot of this is already going to be hammered out in terms of he is not going to be getting out. They're going to set a discovery schedule, which is already probably going on in terms of the government sharing discovery. But the court now, it'll get assigned now to a federal district court judge who will set a firm trial date going forward. And the case will move forward a bit faster now going forward.
And he could face the death penalty.
Ultimately, yes. We'll have to see what happens.
Okay, Hector, you've been great. Thank you so much for your insight locally and both nationally. Rachel?